First it was the army, 6,000 arrested, then the judges, 2,500 jailed. Today, Turkey's Erdogan sacks over 15,000 teachers and 1,000 top academics. Tonight, new images of the attempted coup itself and the deepening mystery as to who really staged it. Good evening from the Republican Convention in Cleveland, Ohio, where they're tuning up behind me for yet another day's action amid the world's deepening crises. One more is asserting itself tonight, the struggle for the presidency of the United States itself. Never in U.S. history have two such unpopular candidates vied for power as Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. For here, Mrs. Trump is the center of attention tonight in the aftermath of her keynote speech that seems to have borrowed heavily from one Michelle Obama made in 2008. Trump himself reportedly furious about the row. And as US Secretary of State John Kerry arrives in Downing Street to meet the new British team, we see for ourselves the true art of diplomacy.
This man is a very smart and capable man.
It's called diplomacy.
That's fantastic. It's going well.
Also on tonight's programme, as the Conservatives' second female leader chairs her first cabinet meeting, the woman who wanted to be the first to lead Labour quits the race. So now a man who calls himself Mr. Normal takes on Jeremy Corbyn. From conflict in Syria to comfort at Lambeth Palace, the Archbishop of Canterbury gives a family of refugees a home. And we're taking a dip later as temperatures soar to over 33 degrees Celsius. Hot enough for you?
First, it was the military, then police, judges, intelligence officers and civil servants. Now tonight, Turkey's President Erdogan has sacked 15,000 teachers and more than 1,500 university deans, purging all those he believes are loyal not to him, but to the man he blames for last Friday's attempted coup. In total today, 24,000 public employees have been dismissed in Turkey. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, joins us now from Ankara. Lindsay, how far can this purge possibly go?
As far as President Erdogan can push it. I am amongst his supporters again tonight. He's told them to come out on the streets every night until Friday. This purge was planned. He'd been trying to do it for a long time, and the coup has provided the opportunity he wanted. They are what he calls, or what he says are, Gulenists. Fethullah Gulen is not a well-known name in Britain or elsewhere in Europe. It's a very well-known name here in Turkey. He's a cleric, exiled in America. He does have a huge following. He has schools, he has universities, he's a wealthy man. President Erdogan and he used to be allies, but 3 years ago they turned against each other. And President Erdogan now says that Fethullah Gulen has a parallel state, and that is what he is trying to destroy. So, 15,000 teachers. They're not behind the coup, but they happen to follow Mr. Gulen. 1,500 university deans. Then we have 9,000 people from the Interior Ministry, people from the Religious Ministry, from the President's own office, from the Prime Minister's office. It goes on and on. They're all losing their jobs, and we don't know what will happen to them next. Today also we've had extraordinary new images of the coup attempt itself. Maybe they give you some idea of why President Erdogan is so angry, maybe why he is so nervous. Some viewers may find these pictures distressing.
It was the most symbolic attack of the failed coup, when rebel Air Force helicopters fired on President Erdogan's palace in Ankara. Today, the Turkish presidency released CCTV footage of the moment rebel tanks ploughed into the crowd of people who had gathered in support. After dawn, more attacks. He wasn't there, but those he had called on to resist the coup were. And they paid with their lives. Traitors attacking martyrs. That's how the president sees it. Now he wants revenge. His cheering fans demand more than a purge of those deemed disloyal. They want blood, a restoration of the death penalty.
This issue will be discussed in the parliament that these villains bombed. I believe that the political parties will come to the right decision. As the final approving authority, I hereby announce my decision that if they make such a move, I will approve it.
Footage of the attack on Parliament was also released today. Lawmakers were still inside during a late-night session. Today, the Prime Minister surveyed the damage. He says the coup attempt is proof enough that the exiled cleric Fethullah Gulen was behind it. Somewhat grudgingly, the government today requested his extradition from the US.
We will give them loads of evidence, but I would like to ask them, after the Twin Towers were hit on September 11th, did you demand evidence when you asked for extradition of terrorists?
More footage of the fateful night. Rebellious Air Force men fired on pro-government protesters at the airbase at Akinci, north of Ankara, killing 7. Members of the Air Force seem to have spearheaded the attempted putsch. The president's own Air Force advisor has been arrested. Today, 29 detained soldiers were transferred to an Istanbul courthouse. 9,000 people, mainly military, are being held now. The 20,000 plus teachers, professors, civil servants and judges who've been summarily sacked will be watching in fear. Who next, as President Erdogan moves to neutralize anyone he regards as an enemy?
In the last few hours, President Erdogan has had a conversation with President Obama demanding the extradition of Fethullah Gulen. It's not clear that that will go ahead. The Americans want proof and they want a proper process. But President Erdogan is much more worried about shoring up his power here, satisfying the people around me, than pandering to his erstwhile allies in the West. Back to you, John.
Lindsay Hilsum, live in Turkey. Now, the American press corps have been giving Boris Johnson a roasting at his joint press conference with the US Secretary of State John Kerry, accusing him of telling outright lies in the past. Mr. Johnson's response, it was all a very long time ago and there are now major world issues to be sorted out. As for Mr. Kerry, he ruled out any special treatment for Britain in terms of a post-Brexit trade deal. Our political editor Gary Gibbon has this report.
The US Secretary of State John Kerry's visit to London, a first chance for Theresa May to show that Britain, post the Brexit vote, isn't closing its door on the world. Only a week ago, Secretary Kerry thought he'd be meeting David Cameron here. It's all happened rather quickly, Theresa May said.
It happened rather quickly.
Britain, for now, still convening a meeting of EU foreign ministers to discuss Syria with the US Secretary of State. Boris Johnson suggested Britain could still have input into EU foreign affairs decisions after leaving the EU. It's not clear EU members are up for that.
One senior Whitehall source said that Prime Minister Theresa May had underestimated the dismay and astonishment amongst Britain's allies when they heard that Boris Johnson was the new Foreign Secretary. They, the source said, had read the caustic remarks he'd made about world leaders in his journalism. They'd read what they felt were deceptions that the Vote Leave campaign ran, including the idea that Turkey was about to join the EU and millions of its people were about to come to Britain's borders. And they felt that the Brexit campaign leaders had melted away the moment the top job in Britain became available and hadn't had a plan ready for Brexit.
At his press conference with the US Secretary of State, the US media gave Boris Johnson a taste of their scepticism.
You've accused the current US President Barack Obama of harboring a part Kenyan's, quote, ancestral dislike for the British Empire, unquote, while claiming, I think untruthfully at the time, that he didn't want a Churchill bust in the White House. You've described a possible future US President, Hillary Clinton, as someone with, quote, dyed blonde hair and pouty lips and a steely blue stare, like a sadistic nurse in a mental hospital, unquote. You've also likened her to Lady Macbeth. Do you take these comments back?
I'm afraid that there is such a rich thesaurus now of things that I've said that have been one way or another, through what alchemy I do not know, somehow misconstrued, that it would really take me too long to engage in a full global itinerary of apology to all concerned.
You have an unusually long history of wild exaggerations and frankly outright lies that I think few foreign secretaries...
Was John Kerry pained or thinking, serve you right?
I'm just wondering how Mr. Kerry and others should believe what you say, considering this very, very long history. And Mr. Kerry,
I appreciate the First Amendment in your right to free speech, but I think we need chapter and verse on this stuff. Sorry.
Go ahead. This is what you would do if you were in my place.
I'm sorry. Look, I mean, let me just repeat my point, which is that I think people are more than welcome to rake over stuff I've written over many, many years, but I think the most important thing is to get on with the very heavy agenda we have before us today.
That's the Boris Johnson that I intend to...
When John Kerry praised Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary tried to hush him up.
Stop that. That's fine. That's great. Thank you.
It's called diplomacy.
That's fantastic. It's going well. It's going well, John. Thank you very much. I think we got through that one all right.
Well, good morning, everybody.
At her first cabinet, Theresa May repeated her warning to ministers that politics was not a game.
When I launched my leadership campaign, I said that politics is not a game. The decisions that we take around this table affect people's day-to-day lives.
She said Brexit was not the government's sole purpose.
We won't be a government that's defined just by Brexit. We will also be a government defined by the social reform that we undertake.
Tomorrow, as will often happen, the agenda's yanked back to Europe as Mrs May makes her first overseas visit as Prime Minister to Berlin to meet Chancellor Merkel and do her best to answer her questions. What relationship does Britain want with the EU? And when are you leaving?
And just briefly, very important information about Syria. Humanitarian activists have claimed that up to 200 civilians have been killed in Syria in what are believed to be US-led coalition airstrikes in the country's north. Most of the deaths are thought to have been in the Islamic State group-controlled village of Al-Taqaa to the north of the strategically important city of Manbij. It has been a stronghold for the group until a Kurdish-led offensive began there in May, and its capture from IS militants would sever an important supply route from Aleppo to Raqqa. US defense officials told Channel 4 News that they are looking into these reports. Well, now we're joined by Asa Hutchinson, now Governor of Arkansas and a former Undersecretary at the Department of Homeland Security under President George W. Bush, and rather an invaluable character here today, it must be said, Governor, because we are not exactly abounding in foreign policy expertise. I'm just wondering, given all the world's problems, is President Trump, if it comes to that, the right man to resolve them?
Well, I think the world community should have some confidence in President Trump. First of all, he's an international business person. He understands trade and commerce, and that's significant. Secondly, he appreciates the UK, our European allies, and understands that even though we want to have a very tough trade policy in the United States, we are still built on commerce. And then finally, I think you can have confidence that he will be a good partner in fighting ISIS, in fighting global terrorism. He will call it that. He will be aggressive in that, but he also look for partners in it.
But, you know, we've only learned a very few foreign policy facts from him. He made one speech back April 27th, and he said we're going to pull out of NATO. That is, the US pull out of NATO. I mean, just as we've got this Turkish crisis, that wouldn't feel terribly comfortable.
Right, but I want you to think, though, about the Republican framework for leadership. And a Donald Trump presidency would surround himself with seasoned political veterans
like you?
In terms of foreign policy. And so have some confidence. Traditionally, the Republican leadership has brought strong allies, relationships there, have been very aggressive in the U.S. defense posture. And I would expect that under a Trump presidency. You're right.
Well, let me pause you there, though, because, I mean, we have an ongoing crisis in Turkey, a member of NATO, keen member. What would he be saying to the Turks right now?
Well, first of all, I don't pretend to speak for Donald Trump on these foreign policy issues.
But I want you to imagine him as your president.
Well, I would expect that his team would be saying these are allies of ours. We need to recognize the strategic importance of this place and of Turkey and the role that they play in really protecting the European.
But I can feel another problem that he'd be thinking about. This is a president who's become more and more Islamic as he goes on. There's a huge Islamic issue in Turkey, Islamist issue. I'm just wondering, for example, he said he doesn't want any Muslims to appear in this country. How good is he going to be with Muslims anywhere else?
First of all, that's not exactly what he said. What his position is, and he's clarified this in some speeches, is that if you are coming to the United States from an area that has a history of terrorism, you need to be vetted very carefully. And so there should be restrictions on geographic places associated with terrorism. And so it's not a religious test type ban.
Just very quickly, you're a former Homeland Security man. Building a wall against Mexican immigration, is that really a goer?
Well, this is obviously there's some things that I disagree with Donald Trump on. I'm supporting him, and I would hope to shape his view as to how we need to protect our borders. We want to make sure that we're open for commerce and trade, and our allies and our friends. We want to continue that path.
Governor Hutchinson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, more from here shortly, but first over to Kathy in London with some developing political news.
Indeed, thanks, John. Angela Eagle has announced she's dropping out of the Labour leadership contest after Owen Smith secured the support of 88 Labour MPs to get onto the ballot paper, saying it was in the best interests of the party for her to stand aside. It leaves Mr Smith as the sole challenger against Jeremy Corbyn. So let's go live now to our political correspondent, Michael Crick, in Westminster. So the members have a choice of two blokes.
Well, so it looks like that, at the moment anyway. At 5 o'clock tonight, both parties looked at how many nominations they got from MPs and MEPs. Owen Smith had 90, Angela Eagle only had 70, decided that in the remaining 24 hours she wasn't going to be able to bridge the gap, and it was best to stand aside in the cause of party unity and give Owen Smith a straight run against Jeremy Corbyn. But there is a court case in the offing next Tuesday where Mr Corbyn's right to stand is being challenged by a rich Labour donor, his right to stand without himself requiring 51 Labour MPs and MEPs to nominate him, which he would find rather difficult, I think. So it's quite possible, who knows, we could see Mr Smith in the next few days elected unopposed, or they may have to reopen nominations, and goodness knows what happens to all those people who've registered today and maybe tomorrow as registered supporters and spent £25 expecting to have a vote. Well, earlier I asked Mr Smith for his reaction to tonight's developments.
I came out ahead in today's ballot, and I think Angela has behaved impeccably and done the right thing for the party to help us unite, and I thank her for having done that. And I will now take my responsibility incredibly seriously to set about contesting this election with Jeremy in a comradely, decent fashion, making the arguments I want to make, that a new generation can take forward Labour's values, be just as radical as Jeremy, but hopefully get us to a position where we can truly win back the trust of the British people and be seen as a credible government waiting in the wings, ready to take over from a Tory government that has been destroying working communities in this country. That's my task, and that's what I intend to do.
You say just as radical as Jeremy Corbyn. You said in 2006 you didn't know which way you would have voted on the Iraq war.
Well, that isn't true. I'm very clear that I was opposed. I'm very clear that I was opposed to the Iraq war.
So the interview was wrong?
I said at the time, well, I think if you read the direct quotation, that isn't what I said. I said at the time that I thought it was a very difficult decision for many people, and I hoped that I would have the courage to vote the right way. But people who knew me at the time, the man I worked for, the people I worked alongside, will testify, as you know, that I was opposed to the Iraq war. I think Chilcot has proved that Iraq was the wrong decision for this country, and I'm pleased that the Labour Party is now clear about that.
Owen Smith talking to Michael Crick a little while earlier. But I'm joined now by the Labour MP Jess Phillips, who was a supporter of Angela Eagle's leadership bid. Given that Owen Smith has just 15% support of the Labour members, according to a poll today, out of 10, how do you rate his chances of beating Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I think that the polls that were done today had the three challengers in, so we're in a different ball game now. So I would say that he has every chance to beat Jeremy Corbyn, and that's what we have to work towards.
9 out of 10 then.
Yeah, let's go 9 out of 10. Why not? Let's be optimistic.
Why not? But you told Jeremy Corbyn that Labour is not about you. So if he does win, as a lot of people expect that he will with his support in the grassroots, can you absolutely promise me that you can continue as an MP under a Jeremy Corbyn leadership?
I think I would find it incredibly difficult, to be honest. What I said in my letter to him still stands. The Labour Party is not a cult of personality. It is a party that is there for people who really need us and for ordinary, everyday people. We've got to stop searching for some level of purity over the idea that we need to be there to help people. So I would find it difficult, but I'm hoping he's not going to win.
But you're saying there you find it incredibly difficult to serve under Jeremy Corbyn. The only conclusion of that is that you would have to leave the Labour Party or join forces with some other MPs and cross the floor.
Sorry, it's quite hard to hear you.
I'll just repeat the question.
I won't be crossing the floor anytime soon, I can guarantee you that. No matter how many people want to call me a red Tory, the day I would join the Tories that will never, ever, ever happen.
But you'd sit as an independent rather than serve under Jeremy Corbyn?
I think I'm going to wait and see what happens. Like I said, he has crossed a couple of red lines for me, and I will find it very difficult to fall in line with a further Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party. But, you know, we're all grown-ups, and some of us will put aside our own personal feelings, as Angela did today. I just wish that Jeremy Corbyn could do the same.
So the members now have a choice of two men. In fact, a female Labour leadership candidate has never beaten a male Labour leadership candidate. This is a party that has equality in its DNA. Does Labour have a problem with female authority?
Well, it does look that way, doesn't it? I mean, I will back Owen 100% now that he is the person who's going up against Jeremy Corbyn. But it would be a lie to say that I wasn't disappointed that once again the Labour Party fails to back a woman, and it's not just because she's a woman that I would want to support her. Angela Regal and Yvette Cooper before her, they are credible women who have had high-ranking jobs in the Labour Party, in the governments, and it just seems really sad to me today that once again the hurdle of the fact that they have wombs is one we cannot get over.
And clearly, Owen Smith thinks it's a winner to talk about his normality. He said he's a normal person with a wife and kids.
I was there when Owen actually said that, and it has been misrepresented. He was just saying that, you know, he's just a normal bloke like anyone else. He wasn't saying that you're not normal if you don't have a wife and kids. I don't have a wife and kids. But
you're not normal.
Many have said that before, Kathy. I think he's been misrepresented, and I think it would be unfair to use that against him.
OK. Jess Phillips, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Well, now here at the Republican convention in Cleveland, Ohio, proceedings have been overtaken by farce after a speech by Donald Trump's wife, Melania, which bore striking similarities to one made by Michelle Obama 8 years ago. Mr. Trump's team insists that fragments of the speech reflected her own thinking and that at least 93% of the speech was completely different. But today was supposed to be devoted to the US economy. Our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris was at the speech last night. Joins me now from downtown Cleveland. Kylie.
Well, yes, Martin, we're in downtown Cleveland, but certainly not beyond the howl around over this speech that Melania Trump delivered last night. On the floor, I've got to say there was a great deal of anticipation before she began, not only because her husband was introducing her, but also I think there is a sense that she can speak with authority to the character of Donald Trump, that she can reassure nervous voters perhaps about the high esteem with which he regards women. That is why she was the headliner last night. It's very unusual to see a potential First Lady speak on the first night of the convention. But instead of talking about her success, the speech was very well delivered. We're talking about the words and the similarities between them and those delivered by Michelle Obama 8 years ago. I think the problem is It raises questions about a campaign that is built around this idea of authenticity and people speaking their minds. Some people say, look, she's not the candidate, it was simply a turn of phrase, there's nothing to see here. But others say, look, what is going on inside this campaign that makes it possible for this to happen? It's a very bumpy beginning to a very important moment in the Trump campaign to be president. There was a moment last night on the floor when there was, though, a real sense of celebration.
And so they danced. But though they may adore him and even want to take him home in a box, 70% of women have an unfavourable view of their candidate.
Just begin it. Some people say that he has a problem with women. Clearly doesn't have a problem with you.
Because I'm a strong woman. He loves strong women. Strong women love Donald Trump, and we're not afraid of him. It's those weak men who are so afraid of such a strong man.
Strong man indeed. Perhaps that's what Donald Trump was channeling when he made his entrance last night.
This is his first appearance at the convention. It's a critical moment, though apparently he's not the keynote speaker tonight, it's his wife. A major change in her role and a big moment.
Born in Slovenia, then communist Yugoslavia, Mrs. Trump described the kind of American dream her husband promises to restore, at least for some.
On July 28, 2006, I was very proud to become citizens of the United States. The greatest privilege on planet Earth.
Chris Christie, recently overlooked as a potential VP pick, looked on adoringly as Mrs. Trump followed the auto cue with poise. More on the words she chose in a moment, but this was the reaction in the room.
Melania, wow. She is so elegant, so graceful. She is our American Princess Diana.
Is she a force for good? Was that good?
Please welcome retired United States Army Lieutenant General and former Director of the Defense.
Your wife in the past has rolled her eyes at some of the comments Donald Trump has made.
No, she didn't.
Do you think he has a problem with women?
I don't know how you follow an act like Melania Trump.
This is the footage of Mary Pat Christie on stage with Mr. Trump when he accused Hillary Clinton of playing the woman card.
The only thing she's got going is the woman's card.
The Trump campaign needed Melania Trump to persuade voters her husband is no misogynist. But by this morning, the effort was compromised by the revelation that parts of her speech closely resembled one Michelle Obama delivered 8 years ago.
That you work hard for what you want in life.
You work hard for what you want in life.
That your word is your bond.
That your word is your bond.
And you do what you say and keep your promise.
That you do what you say you're going to do.
That you treat people with respect.
That you treat people with dignity and respect.
There's more, but here's how the section closes out.
Is the reach of your dreams.
Is the strength of your dreams.
And your willingness to work hard for them.
And your willingness to work for them.
The campaign response, it's not plagiarism, it's the use of common words. Oh, an agendered retort, for good measure.
You know, and certainly we've noted that the Clinton camp was the first to get it out there in trying to say that there was something untoward about the speech that Melania Trump gave. It's just another example, as far as we're concerned, that when Hillary Clinton is threatened by a female, the first thing she does is try to destroy the person.
Day 2 in Cleveland, and the party faithful were looking to put day 1 behind them.
You're going to play to certain things that people emote with, and I'm pretty sure Melania or Michelle Obama have at least a few intersections of care in the same areas.
For crying out loud, she said what any woman would say for her husband, just that this is what we stand for. I mean, that's what you want him to say.
And if it was a speechwriter, then if I was Mr. Trump, I'd fire the speechwriter.
In other words, you're fired. That well-known Trumpism, just the kind of reality check the campaign would have liked to avoid.
Kylie Morris in downtown Cleveland, and we'll be back later with more on the protests here in this city. Not as you might expect outside, but right here inside the convention hall from Republicans determined to do all they can do to stop Donald Trump's nomination.
Now, a Syrian family has moved into a cottage in the grounds of the Archbishop of Canterbury's London residence, Lambeth Palace, the launch of a new scheme encouraging faith groups and charities to help resettle refugees in the UK. The Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, called it a groundbreaking development to bring communities together and support traumatised families. But is it shifting the responsibility onto volunteers rather than cash-strapped local authorities? Fatma Manji reports.
This family, like so many, enjoyed the sun with a kickabout in the park today. Their laughter hides the trauma of a journey they've made and the tragedy unfolding in the country they've left behind. Syrian refugees who've been in the UK for less than 3 weeks. As they settle in, the charity helping them thinks it's better for them not to be identified. The grounds of Lambeth Palace are also now home to one refugee family. Keen to protect their privacy too, their host, the Archbishop of Canterbury, invited the Home Secretary to meet them today, away from the cameras, as she launched a new scheme to support community groups who want to take in Syrians. But this scheme only includes hosting 20,000 refugees over 5 years, something the government has already committed to. The head of Oxfam has described numbers that we take in the UK as shameful. It is just 0.9% of the population. Do you think there is a strong case for taking more refugees than the 20,000?
I think that 20,000 is a significant number, and we are doing our best to make sure that we do deliver on that. We're not going to rush it. We have to do it in a way that doesn't compromise security, as we discussed earlier, and has high standards for people who come here, which is what we want for people who live here. But let's not forget, that's not all the government is doing. We are also the second largest bilateral donor to the refugee camps, which need our aid.
The government also denies it's palming off responsibility from cash-strapped local authorities onto community groups.
Right, so Ben, what we're trying to do today is help the ladies order some more halal meat.
In Shropshire, Jules Payne, a volunteer for Refugee Action, is already helping welcome Syrians with the practicalities of shopping for food, learning English and anything else for life in Britain.
It's been inspiring, uplifting, humbling, enormously humbling actually, to have spent time with the families and spending time with the children. You know, they are this tag of refugees. They're human beings like us.
Jules says she hopes the government programme is properly resourced to support volunteers. Sentiments shared by Justin Welby. He's also worried about heightened anti-immigrant rhetoric in the country.
We're deeply, deeply concerned by that. It is a really serious problem in some parts of the country, in some areas. I think what we'd want to say is find again the confidence in this country that has enabled to do this so often, us to do this so often before and so well.
One Syrian refugee welcomes the scheme but thinks the government must go further. Hassan Akkad has been in London for 5 months.
2 years ago I thought the conflict will end soon and everyone's going to go back, but I feel like now there's no solution on the horizon. It's getting worse and worse, and more countries are intervening, which is making things a lot more complicated in Syria.
Though many hope to return one day, for now an entire generation of Syrians will grow up not knowing their homeland.
Fatma Manji reporting there. The militant Islamic State group has posted a video online which purportedly shows the Afghan refugee who attacked train passengers with an axe in Germany last night. Officials in Bavaria say that 2 of the 5 people who were injured are still in a critical condition. The video names the 17-year-old asylum seeker as Mohammed Riyad, who makes threats wielding a knife. He was eventually shot dead by police. Now, the brother of the Pakistani social media star Qandeel Baloch will appear in court tomorrow charged with her murder after claiming he killed her because she'd brought dishonour on their family. The fate of Ms. Baloch, who described herself as a modern-day feminist, has sparked outrage over the death of a young woman who simply wanted to live life on her own terms. In a moment, we'll speak to the Oscar-winning documentary maker who's calling for a law against honour killings. But first, here's our Asia correspondent, Jonathan Miller. And just to warn you, his report does contain footage from her own videos, some of which are adult in nature.
How I'm looking?
Twitter trending.
Beautiful.
Facebook viral.
Or hot.
The iconoclastic Kandil Baloch loved a camera, posting risque videos, tame by Western standards. For all her fans in the conservative Islamic Republic of Pakistan, there were many who denounced her as a shameless harlot. This simply had to end. And so it did. On Saturday, Kandil murdered at just 26. An honour killing, it was reported. Her outraged brother deciding to avenge the family's honour, impugned and scandalised by his scarlet sister. Kandil Baloch, who just last week described herself as a modern-day feminist, free thoughts, free mindset. She'd written on her Facebook page, "I love the way I am." Her funeral ceremony officiated by the menfolk of her village. Her younger brother Wasim, standing in the light blue tunic, apprehended by the police and unapologetic. He admitted strangling her and blamed her Facebook videos. No regrets, he said. Often, so-called honour killers get away with murder if their family forgives them. The police say they won't permit that in this case. He's in court tomorrow. Not for the first time, a small group of protesters gathered in Islamabad to condemn these honour killings. Women have awoken, is what they shouted. But men in Pakistan have not. Every year, the number of reported honour killings rises. 1,100 last year, and that's reckoned to be but the tip of a murderous iceberg.
There is no honour in killing. Such killings are simply sheer murder.
Kandil Baloch was a social media sensation, a self-promoting selfie stick-wielding actress, model, singer with an iPhone.
Baby, please don't do it again.
She defiantly expressed her sexuality, but behind the lipstick and the painted nails, Kandil lifted the lid on misogyny and hypocrisy in Pakistan, a repressed society with more searches for online porn than any other country. Last month, she uploaded selfies of her with a prominent mullah who admitted he'd proposed to her. Mufti Abdul Kavi has been embarrassed by all this and also fired. If you love me, Kandil Baloch wrote just 2 weeks ago, I will always be in your heart. If you hate me, I will always be in your mind. That's quite some epitaph.
Well, I'm joined now by the Pakistani filmmaker and activist Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy. She won her second Oscar earlier this year for a film about honour killings in Pakistan. Sharmeen, the videos we've just seen are quite raunchy. How brave do you think Kandil was to post that kind of thing online?
You know, there exists space in Pakistan for women who post these kind of things. There are actresses who appeared in, semi-naked in videos that have been leaked, scantily dressed women. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that she used her popularity to challenge the clerics. A few weeks ago on television, she was on a popular television show where there was a cleric. Afterwards, he came to her hotel room and she recorded everything. And once that started circulating, once she actually took her fame to take a stand, that's when things started going south for her. I think that she would have been able to post these videos all the time and nothing would have really happened to her. It was when she decided to push the status quo and show the hypocrisy of the clerics, that's when she landed herself into trouble.
And yet, I mean, she's far from a one-off, tragically. I mean, the scale of violence, not just so-called honour killings, but violence more generally against women is pretty widespread in Pakistan, isn't it?
Well, you are seeing a society that is in flux. You have many young women who are demanding their rights, who have access to cell phones, where there's internet penetration. They're watching photographs, they're looking at videos, they're becoming more aware of their rights. They want to get married out of choice. They want to work. They want a more liberated life. And we come from a deeply misogynistic society where the old patriarchal structure is in place. And there is a push and pull factor, and there is a blowback. And there are men who believe that women shouldn't cross that line, and when they do, there should be repercussions. Having said that, the government of Pakistan recognizes that the numbers of violence against women are going up. In the Kandil Baloch case, the government has made itself a party so that there can be no forgiveness and no blood money can be given, so that the brother is sent to jail. That is sending a clear signal that the government realizes something needs to be done. And in the past few months, the government has passed the Punjab Protection Bill, which is a landmark bill about domestic violence. And the two bills that are stuck in Parliament right now, the anti-rape bill and the anti-honor killing bill, which is what I'm campaigning for, are hopefully going to get pushed through.
But there have been massive protests against those bills, haven't there?
You know, anytime in Pakistan the word woman comes up in any bill, there are going to be protests. That is just the environment there. Having said that, civil rights activists, women's rights organizations, journalists, media houses are really rallying for there to be stringent laws to tackle many of these issues. Honor killing is an epidemic in Pakistan. It is not taking place in small towns and villages. It is taking place in major metropolitan cities, and something needs to be done about that. And I think that there is a consensus building in the country, and I think Kandil Baloch's murder has been the tipping point.
Indeed. Well, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Now, too many of Britain's jails have become unacceptably violent and dangerous places. That's according to the prisons watchdog, who's warned that the death toll is set to rise. Peter Clark, who became Chief Inspector of Prisons in February, talked of a grim situation becoming worse and said the lack of safety posed a real risk to the government's hopes of improving rehabilitation. Our senior Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel has more.
This time last year, prisons in England and Wales were described as in their worst state for a decade. A year on, and the violence, the drugs and the injuries have multiplied. In 2015, there were 20,000 assaults in prisons, and of these, nearly 3,000 were serious assaults. There were over 32,000 incidents of self-harm in the last year, and 100 self-inflicted deaths in the 12 months up to March.
The numbers are staggering.
The numbers are staggering, and the increases year on year are extraordinarily troubling. Around 25–27% increases in self-inflicted deaths and attacks. These are appalling statistics.
This shows no sign of changing this year, does it?
It's too early to say what the trends are this year, but I haven't seen anything so far in the 6 months in which I've been Chief Inspector of Prisons to suggest that the situation is changing for the better.
It wasn't so long ago Michael Gove, as Justice Secretary, was touring prisons promising radical reform.
Sorry, I'm Michael. I'm the Minister.
But the Chief Inspector says the lack of safety risks all those ambitions, regardless of who is now in charge. His replacement, Liz Truss, says she's under no illusions, but has to face the fact there is no national plan to combat the menace of legal highs.
The impact of these substances are far worse. They're unpredictable. They lead to extreme violence, and we've seen some what can only be described as grotesque examples of self-harm caused by these drugs. There needs to be a really serious and determined effort to stop these.
It doesn't help, though, when jails ignore inspectors' findings, with some failing to implement more than half their recommendations.
It is disappointing that too many prisons do not appear to be taking our reports as seriously as they should. We have seen some prisons where a very small proportion of our recommendations have been met, and hardly surprisingly, those prisons have either deteriorated or certainly not improved.
Next week, there will be another round of stats on prison violence, and they're unlikely to show any improvement. And that is the issue that will dictate the pace of the government's prison reform agenda.
Simon Israel reporting there. Now, disrupted trains, melting roads and zoo animals offered ice lollies to help them cool down. Yes, Britain has been sweltering on the hottest day of the year so far, with top temperatures of more than 33 Celsius, making it warmer than, wait for it, Athens, Islamabad and Algiers. The kind of day when a dip in an outdoor pool is highly tempting. Our weather presenter Liam Dutton has popped down to one in central London. Lucky you, Liam.
Thanks, Kathy. Good evening to you. Well, it's a stunning summer's evening down here at King's Cross Swimming Pond in the centre of London. Look at that, barely a cloud in the sky. It's sunny, it's hot, and there's lots of people cooling down from the intense heat that we've had through today. Now, today's officially been the hottest day of the year so far, 33.5 Celsius. That's 92 in Fahrenheit, if you like old money, at Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire. And it's not just been across southern parts of the UK that it's been hot. Take a look at this satellite map from earlier today taken from space. You can see barely a cloud in the sky right across the UK, up to 27 across the likes of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and widely into the low 30s further southwards. Now, of course, having had such a poor June, which was full of rain, wind and temperatures that struggle, people have been outdoors throughout today lapping up the sunshine. This was the scene earlier this afternoon on the beach in Blackpool. You can see people relaxing in the sunshine and occasionally heading to the sea to dip their toes into the water. And there was a similar picture along the south coast at Brighton today. Again, lots of people lying on the beach and enjoying the sunshine. Now, meanwhile, back here in the capital in London, this was an aerial shot earlier on today of one of the Lidos in southeast London. You can see it's jam-packed. Lots of people are lapping up the sunshine, and of course the parks were full as people popped out on their lunch breaks to take advantage of the sun too. But there have been major delays and cancellations out of Paddington and Waterloo on the railway this evening due to the concerns that the heat may buckle the rails.
Well, I'm madly jealous of you keeping your feet cool there. So why has it been so hot?
Well, take a look at this map, Kathy, this huge plume of heat and humidity, this orange and red that's been moving all the way up from Spain and Portugal. You can see the wind arrows pushing that hot air northwards. Will it last? We'll find out and join me for a full weather forecast at the end of the programme.
Thanks very much. Let's go over to John now.
But let the delegates just freely choose and move forward. I mean, that's all we've
After the break, those who are not with him are against him. The Republican faithful who still want to stop Donald Trump angrily protesting inside this convention hall in their bid to save the party they love. You'd expect Donald Trump to attract noisy protests as well as fervent support, but the surprise here is that the biggest howls of dissent have come from the floor of the convention itself. In fact, there was a major shouting match as Republicans determined to show the strength of feeling against Mr. Trump found for themselves, frustrated by the rules.
Protest had been expected outside the convention centre, but not this.
Well, I think everybody would prefer to have people be able to vote their conscience.
20% of the states here had been trying to stage a vote effectively to unseat Trump as the party's candidate, but quickly rewritten party rules saw them off.
Those in favor of the rules package will say aye. Those opposed shall say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
That's it. The anti-Trump rebellion is over.
We want Trump. We want Trump.
What are they afraid of? If those rules are so good,
what's been done to Virginia?
Well, we were disenfranchised tonight. That's what was done tonight.
I mean, it was complete crap. What just happened there? They just lied to everybody on national television.
No! Rule of call, third of the rule!
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Well, I'm joined now by Ken Crow, a supporter of Donald Trump and co-founder of the Tea Party of America, and by Dane Waters, who founded Delegates Unbound, the group that organized last night's campaign to allow delegates a conscience vote against Mr. Trump. Well, look, there was quite a noisy fight last night. What is it about him that you love?
What is it about Mr. Trump? He's the only one that can save America. Nobody else could defeat Hillary Clinton this year. He's the only one that can defeat Hillary Clinton, in my opinion.
This is a pretty desperate state of affairs because fundamentally there are actually two candidates out there that are probably two of the most unpopular candidates that have been put before the American people, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, first and foremost, what we've wanted this entire convention is for the delegates just to freely choose the nominee. If it's Donald Trump, it's Donald Trump. And the best way to unify the party, honestly, is for them to say, we want Donald Trump, and then to move forward. I personally have issues with Donald Trump. I don't like the tone he's setting in this country. But for the record, I originally supported Donald Trump. I wanted an outsider. I wanted somebody new. But then he showed, in a way, that a tone that in this country that I just personally don't like. So that's what's going on.
And I know you like a bit of rough talk because you started the Tea Party and all the rest of it. But you must admit, Donald Trump has been out on the edge there, hasn't he?
Once or twice, but so was George Patton, so was Winston Churchill. So, great leaders are opinionated, and they're going to state their opinion, and they're not politically correct, and we accept that, and we embrace it. We love it.
It can lead to awful misunderstandings in international diplomacy, possibly even war.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, like Ken, I want a firm leader, okay? But there's a difference between being firm and stating your opinion and saying it in a way that divides this country and with the vitriol that's associated with it. You're right. I mean, the things that he says off the top of his head, I mean, I've worked in the Middle East, I've worked around the world, and I can tell you firsthand the impact of these comments. And that is just something that we just find, that I personally find a serious problem with a Trump candidacy.
But for you, he is the product of a rather unusual marriage.
I often say Donald Trump is the love child of John Wayne and Ronald Reagan. And we love him. We love him.
We live in a dangerous world. We don't want any pistols at dawn.
Oh, yeah, we need more of them. But, we have too much political correctness in America today, and it's costing us. We have to be able to call our enemy what they are, and our current leadership won't do it, and Donald Trump will.
But I mean, that has led to awful things being said about Muslims, about women, about just about anybody who has a gender or a race.
Well, listen, I'm the first to say that there's too much political correctness in this world. But when our children are looking for a role model, they're looking for somebody in the bully pulpit, we need somebody who actually will unify and not divide. So I believe with Ken that we need somebody who can stand up, speak their mind, work against the establishment. But the tone that Donald Trump is setting and what he's saying is divisive in this country, and we can't afford that to be the case.
Well, you use the word divisive. This is the most divided the Republican Party has been since 1968. A vast number of really talented people have not attended this convention.
Well, you're absolutely correct, and believe me, we are concerned about it. And I find it reprehensible that Governor Kasich isn't here. I find it reprehensible that many. I know, and he's supposed to be here at least to say hello, and he won't even do that. For us to win in November, we have to unify. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we're going to have to put a little bit aside and unify behind one candidate.
What could you put a little bit aside?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you want to unify, then let the Republican Party allow the delegates to freely choose Donald Trump. I mean, that's what it boils down to. If you want credibility, if you want to unify, then let the delegates.
But Donald Trump won. He won the primary. No, he won the primary, and they're trying to strip him of the victory. That's the end game. And
I'm never going to be able to resolve this dispute between the two of you. Let's hope America does. I have to leave it at that. But thank you very much. We're back at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Until then, from Kathy in London, all of us here in Cleveland, Ohio. That, for tonight at least, is Channel 4 News. Have a very good evening.